Buddy, hey, we are so glad that you're here, honestly. It's lovely to see this group to see your faces. It's really, it's why we're here. We can't really, at this particular moment, maybe make a huge difference in the systems of care. We can't make a huge difference, sort of in orbits way outside of what our level of, where we, sort of where we can have impact. But if we can make a difference here this afternoon, for those of you sitting here, offer you something to bring back to your work, the hard work that you do, that will make your lives better, that will make the lives of the tenants you serve better, we're going to be very happy. Right. So thank you, and honestly, hold us to that. Please hold us to that. If there's something you want to talk about and we're not getting to it, let us know. It's not a challenge, it's a favor. If there's something we're talking about and you want to amplify the point with an example, we would love it. We're partners here this morning in this training. I know you're counting on us, but we are counting on you too. So thank you very much for being here. I'm Patti Abelson. I'm an AVP of Training and Quality Initiatives at the Bridge. I'm a social worker by training. I've been doing this, as you might guess, for many, many, many years. I feel very lucky to be doing work I love. Keeps you young. Really, no kidding. Back at the Bridge when I do training, I often say to staff what I'm going to say to you, which is, you all do the hard work that's client-facing, of interacting with individuals who really need you, who really need the services that our agencies provide, can really benefit from those services. But that is easier said than done, right? Providing that benefit, meeting the needs. It's tough. And it's wonderful that we care. Really, it's wonderful that we care about doing that. And my job at the Bridge, same as it is here right now, is to support staff. You support the clients, we support you. And I hope that's what this afternoon feels like. My colleague here is Louis. You want to introduce yourself, Louis?
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming. This is, a great after lunch crowd. Usually lunch, I was like, oh man, this is going to be, there's going to be no one around here, but this is great. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Louis Fagundes. I'm a social worker as well. I currently work on an ACT team, so I do direct care. I've worked in residential, outpatient, inpatient, so I've had a number of years of experience as well. I've been a social worker for 20 plus years. So just like, Patti, I want to be able to sit here, answer any questions. And, the whole point of the training and boundaries is that, boundaries are there, obviously to protect the clients and the residents, but also to protect ourselves as workers. Because like Patti was saying, this is hard work, with at times difficult population, and sometimes we don't see the toll it takes on ourselves. And, that it leads to, well, we did in another training, we were talking about, retention in the field and how hard it is to, staff a lot of these places and staff. And one of the reasons I think is because we sometimes don't take care of ourselves like we should. And that means, having some self-compassion, but also receiving the support you need from fellow staff, from your supervisors, from the agency. So I'm looking forward to, having a conversation with all of you today. And like I said, like Patti said, if something pops up, sometimes question and answer at the end, you lose momentum. we don't want you to lose that momentum. Please put up your hand, say what you feel in the moment, and we want to address it as soon as possible. So thank you very much.
In addition to conversation, we are offering you a framework, something to use as you think about establishing boundaries. It's, to some extent, it's a personal matter, but to even a larger extent, it isn't. We believe so strongly, and in some ways it's the focus of all of the training that we do at the Bridge, is that joy matters. Your joy matters in doing this work. Boundaries. Pardon? Oh my God, well, I'm going to say that again because it's important and I want to make sure everybody heard. And that is the message. Is that okay? Yeah? That is the message that your joy matters. Boundaries, understanding the purpose of your work, believing in that purpose, doing each and every day those things that help achieve the purpose is a source of joy and the best prevention there is against burnout.
That's what I was going to say, because, I agree that joy matters, but so much of frustration, and I make that really clear. It is impossible to tolerate and absorb the frustration if there isn't a balance. It is a given for all of you that work is full of frustration. The systems in which we operate aren't really created to meet the needs of the individuals we serve. They just aren't. Very often people are in our housing because the other systems have failed them. And that you may be in sort of low-touch programs with a very high-need population. Now, how challenging is that? And how hard is it not to feel that on your own shoulders when there are gaps that don't have to do with your capacity, but have to do with the gaps in the system? So that to me and to Louis, that makes our message today all the more important. Because what Sharon is saying about, there's frustration in this work is so true. Finding opportunities for joy, finding opportunities for safety, to promote safety, and by the way, that's what we mean by reducing risk. Promoting safety, and improving care. Boundaries, understanding boundaries is fundamental, is essential to any effort to improve care, to get it right for the individuals that we serve. I was just about to say next slide, but so let's see. Yeah, well, I'll sit it down. I don't know why. I just stand up. But the very important message here, really, is that it's meant to be interactive. Your stories are the stories we're going to use for our shared learning today. But you know what that means? That means that this is a judgment-free zone. How can you possibly ask a question, especially about something as touchy as boundaries? Because any question you ask is probably going to be about not knowing. And not knowing isn't that comfortable. In bounds, staying within the bounds of your job does mean being able to tolerate that discomfort, because part of your obligation to yourself and to your clients is asking questions. is asking questions, finding that space, that person who can help you, because this is not work you can do alone. And the establishment of boundaries, where you draw the line, is not work you can do alone. You're not meant to find those answers on your own. Part of what Shinny is offering you is an opportunity to come together and find answers to that question of where do you establish housing, where do you establish boundaries in the context of housing programs. And thank you so much, Shinny, for allowing us to be here. We really deeply appreciate it. So Shinny is here to help you, and you need to know the people back at your agency who are there to help you too. Because how you handle a situation, whether it's something as simple as somebody asking you for money, which can turn into something not so simple but complex, asks you for a cigarette, complains to you about another staff member. These are things that happen all the time. Is there anybody here who hasn't experienced at least one of those? Right? Probably not. So you're not meant to improvise. You need frameworks, you need guidance for responding to the things we know are real and happen to you every day. And we're going to be very disappointed in ourselves if we don't get to that. So we will.
And I just wanted to jump in just to piggyback off what Patti was saying was we come into this field a lot of times with not that much training. Things that we take for granted, like someone coming and asking you for a cigarette. That's a normal thing that any human interaction, you give them a cigarette. But if someone doesn't tell you these things, hey, we can't do that in this setting, we're not going to learn. So that's why judgment-free, when you discuss things that occur, you have to be in a setting where you can bring up mistakes and it's not going to be held against you. It's going to be used as a learning experience. And that's where the supervision from your supervisor and the support from your coworkers will come in this really, really important and hard work we do.
We're going to invite you to broaden your thinking today. Because it's one thing to know that there's a boundary, say when somebody asks you for a cigarette, that you don't cross the boundary, you don't give them a cigarette. But that's not a favor to just tell you that rule. If your purpose, and you know it, is also about establishing connection with individuals who feel so disconnected from others in their lives, to establish relationship with you, that is contrary to the kind of relationship they've had with other helpers, whether it's police, whether it's teachers in the public school system who sees you as a, impossible kid and sends you down to special ed because you're hungry, whether it's a prison guard, an aide in a psychiatric hospital. Caregivers have disappointed folks that are in our housing for decades and decades and decades. So now I'm going to ask you to think about, how do you say no, you can't have a cigarette, and at the same time fulfill the purpose of letting our tenants know that we're different, that we are here to help? That's the essence of the work. And that's why boundaries are not just about knowing the rules. That's why boundaries are also so much about understanding your purpose. Because if you get that your purpose goes well beyond following the rules, you'll struggle more with how do I say no in a way that allows this tenant to know I care about him. I care about her. And that there's a good reason why I'm saying no. I'm not just going to take this, I'm not allowed to. That doesn't help a client. We care about your health. I mean, we can talk about the kind of things you can say, how awful you know it is. Do you want a cigarette? You can't have one. Even if I have a pack of menthol in my pocket, right? And you know I do, right? You know I do. So that is why we think these conversations matter and that they need to have depth. When we first got to the bridge, we handed out a lot. When I first got to the bridge, the training and boundaries was like 100 rules. And you want to know something? At the end of this training, we're going to give you those rules because you need them to. But you will not experience the satisfaction of doing the work if all you do is say to yourself at the end of the day, well, I followed the rules. When we talk about joy, when we talk about pride, when we're talking about staying within the bounds of work in ways that allow you to feel that pride, we're talking about saying no. At the same time, you say, yes, here's what I'm here for, and this is what we're going to do together. It's not easy, but I want you to at least feel it's a possibility. To know what the yes part of that answer is after you say no. I can't do that, but you know what? Here's what's going to happen. And it's wonderful that we're together to do that other work. It's a different way to think about boundaries, right? Does it make sense? Does it seem like too much? Yeah. Thank you. Did I just skip one? Yes, I do. So boundaries in everyday life. Boundaries is not, it's not jargon, right? We talk about boundaries in life all the time. Look at us sitting in this room, right? There's a separation between us. And in some ways, the separation, the division of where we are, it connotes a division of labor. It says something. The fact that there is this boundary here, this table in front of me, in front of us, right? Says something about our various roles. What's our role here as presenter? What you're there in the audience. There's a problem for us in a way because, we're set up here to look like the experts, right? I'm not sure what the alternative would be. I'm not suggesting that there's a better way to do this. But I am saying that it lends itself to certain ideas about each of our roles and each of our status. And staying within the bounds of your job doesn't always mean accepting the premise of the role and the responsibility. Because there are a lot of times where the premise of your role is that we're somehow superior to the individuals that we serve. And it's so hard to talk about because we have real authority, really. We have real status. We have real access to means that the individuals we serve don't have. But just like I look at you and I know how much knowledge there is out there, that I'm sure there are plenty of you who could do this training, kidding around. All you have to do, is really just think about things a little differently, which we have the luxury to do because we can take a step, we're paid to take a step back and think about this stuff. You're paid to be in the thick of it and not have that much time to take a step back and think about it, right? But it is to say that this boundary, which looks like it's telling you, we know an awful lot that you don't know, isn't true.
And along those lines as well is that just in the nature of our work, we might not feel it in the moment, but we do have a significant amount of power over the clients we serve. And knowing that and internalizing that really is the first step in developing that boundary and knowing that, even the coolest client on earth that comes down, you've known them for years, and you have a really good rapport with them, it's never going to be as if you can be friends because you have an inherent power over them. So knowing that is one of the first steps to developing that boundary and your role, and knowing that the dynamic is not going to be the same as in your other relationships.
It's so profound. It's really very important. And pretending to friendship is so disingenuous and so inauthentic. And yet sometimes it feels like the easiest thing there is to do. It's not so different from not giving that cigarette. Sometimes it feels like giving that cigarette is the easiest thing to do. The difference between being friendly and being friend, we're going to talk more about that later. It's one of the very common boundary dilemmas. We know loneliness is a terrible problem for the folks we serve. People will lure you into the kind of friendship they wish they could have with you, right? You have the idol. You look at your service plans of most tenants, and if you go take a look at some service plans, and you know what you're going to see? You're going to see they want to be you. I want a full-time job. I want a place to live. I want friends. They want to have what you have. They want to be who you are. And they want you they love to have you as their friend. So when we talk about pride in our work, when we talk about joy in our work, we're talking about really embracing what it is we do and who it is we can be in the lives of these individuals who are the tenants in our program. Because if we can't embrace that, if we can't put into words what it is we are meant to do when we walk through that door in the morning, or whenever your shift begins, and leave at the end of that shift and think, my purpose was to convey hope that life doesn't always have to be the same as it had been in the past, and that we had this 15-minute exchange, and you know what? I could see on his face that something shifted for him. You really understand what it is you want to do. You leave work, Sharon, with all the frustrations that people have. You also leave work with a certain sense of joy, because that went right. And just like our clients need connection, we need connection. And you feel it when you connect with a client, right? Don't you? And it feels pretty good. But that is not a truth that's apart from boundaries. Because I say connecting with a client, but boy, are there bounds around that. So knowing your purpose, I'm not going to embarrass anybody to ask you to say what you think your purpose is, although we may later. Oh, wait, I forgot to. Part of what we are meant to do is, can everybody see the screen, by the way? Right, good, okay. Part of what we're meant to do when we talk about offering sort of an alternative universe to individuals who are our tenants, to people who have lived in an environment that has been a source of trauma, has been a source of, everything from, being unhoused, to being hungry, to being really poor, no medical care, no access to good education. The idea that folks come to us with sort of more negative experiences than you can imagine, and we somehow have to counteract that. The work we do to counteract that has a name. It's what we mean by trauma-informed care. We begin our relationship with our clients understanding the hurt. At the Bridge, we talk about universal standards, I think it is. The idea that even if we don't know the particular trauma our clients have experienced, we can assume that most of our clients have found somehow or other in their lives the amazing strength you need to survive what they've survived. It's incredible when you hear people's stories to think that they're still vertical. Sometimes I say horizontal by mistake, but that they're vertical is incredible. It's incredible strength.
And one of the best ways we can help someone with a traumatic history start the healing process is to establish boundaries. Because in essence, what any level of trauma is for someone is someone crossing a boundary. Whether it's a loved one when they were growing up, whether it's any person that they were supposed to trust, crossing that boundary and causing harm. Regardless of what it is, we don't specifically have to know. Just like Patti was saying, we assume just because a lot of the population we work with, something like 80-85%, have a trauma history. So going in and knowing that one of the ways we can protect them from more trauma is to establish these boundaries and let them know that, hey, this isn't going to happen with me. I am going to be someone that is safe for you to interact with. So it is very important to know that, boundaries are not just these rules we follow because the agency says, you got to do this, you got to do this. It's a means of protecting our clients. And along the lines of this, I say this, I think, at every training, along the continuum of the care of our clients, people throw around the word clinician or clinical work. And I think people have a very specific idea sometimes that, a clinician is a doctor, a therapist, or anything. Anyone who is interacting with our clients and is part of that continuum of healing is providing clinical care to that client. If you have direct care with our client, whether it's the environmental services person, whether it's a security guard, whether it's a front desk person, all the way up to the doctor, you are all providing clinical care. And that is why it's important for every person on that continuum to have appropriate boundaries. The boundaries will fall apart even if one person isn't on board. It could be, hey, maybe someone along the way hangs out with the client outside. And then, guess what? That'll come back at some point, maybe not at that moment, but at some point, it could come back to lead to something detrimental for the client. The other thing that goes along with that is this idea of, what's therapy or therapeutic. And along the same lines, anywhere along that continuum of care that we're working with our client to heal, all of that work is therapeutic. From the first time someone comes into the office and that person at the front desk says hello and greets them warmly, that has a healing impact on the client. All the way through, therapy and therapeutic activities do not happen in a 45-minute session once a week, especially for, for housing staff. We guys, well, whenever I worked, we see them more than probably the average clinician in their week, right? You see a doctor once a month, you see a social worker maybe once a week for therapy, but guess who's there every day in their home? Guess who's maybe has a phone call with a family member at 8 o'clock at night, and it's a triggering event. They're not gonna call the doctor, they're not gonna call the therapist, they're gonna come to you. And how are you going to be the person that can provide the support they need in that moment? So that's why it's hugely important for everyone, not only to realize the impact and the care they provide to the client, but also knowing that it's a huge team job. No one can do this alone. And every bit of information you get is important and needs to be passed on to the entire team. I don't know how many times I've had the environmental services staff be like, "Hey, I saw John downstairs. He was pacing around the backyard. He looked like something was up." He saw it, he knew it, he knows the client, and he knows something's off. Gives me a heads up, then we already know. It's like, look, this is someone, maybe one of us has to go talk to him. That happens every day, and it's hugely important, and it can't be overstated how important every person is in the client's care.
We're going to we're going to touch now upon an issue that we'll get to later on, and that is boundaries are also about our relationship with each other. They're about a relationship with our tenants, and they're about your relationship with your supervisor or manager and your relationship with your team. How many teams have been disrupted by special friendships between two people on a team that make others feel excluded? That's a boundaries crossing when that happens, because we have an obligation to promote connection and safety in our teams. And understanding the nature of relationships that we have with each other, the purpose of those relationships, and therefore then the boundaries on those relationships, is just as important as they are with the tenants. So I really hope you all feel that. What Louis said about, the person at the front desk being an essential member of that team of folks who help our tenants, right? It's also true, greeting a tenant comes in with a smile. Think about what it means when you walk into your program and to greet a colleague with a smile. Honestly, that's, it doesn't mean how, that you're inauthentic, that you're phony, that there aren't real tensions in relationships that have to be addressed. But none of this is make-believe. But if you keep in mind what it looks like when it really goes right, it's something to aspire to. And it helps so much to have that sense of what it looks like when it goes right. No, I did something wrong. I'm talking about when it goes right. I really don't want to ask for help, but I don't know what I did wrong. Can you help me out here?
Oh, there we go.
Okay. The answer to the question of what does this really mean we say and do when we're interacting with clients has everything to do with the principles of trauma-informed care. There is, Louis, your point about boundaries and trauma is essential, most sources of trauma are boundary crossings. Trauma-informed care is a means of helping us to achieve our purpose. What does that mean we actually do? What does that mean we actually do? Because I think that's a really important question to be able to answer. It means that we keep our safety in mind when we interact with clients. And, you know, sometimes safety does have to do with that smile. Sometimes safety has to do with being in a room with a client who's upset and making sure you're not standing in front of the door because it looks then like you're trying to block their ability to leave. Safety has to do when a client's got a full metal water bottle in their hand and, you know, they're waving it around and you're comfortable enough to say, Wendy, you know, if you would just put that down, if you would put that down, you think you can? I'm telling you, I'd feel a heck of a lot more comfortable because I want to be here with you. I want to have the conversation. And if you would put the bottle down, wait till you see what happens, how much nicer it's going to be. And not only am I going to ask you to put it down, but I'm going to say, put it down and take a deep breath. Safety, your safety, in many ways is also in your hands because you are alone in a room with a client at that moment. You know, there is no one to help you. I mean, of course, that, you know, there's plenty of help. You have your team, you call on them, there are policies, there are procedures, you on your phone, you have a code, you know, where people know to come to you. But I really mean that you have to call on what you know in that moment to protect your safety. A lot of people don't like that message. It can feel burdensome. But it is also the truth. Staying within the bounds of your job means doing those kinds of things that will help clients stay calm, be less likely to escalate. I don't know if any of you joined us last year for our de-escalation training. I hope so, because this is sort of building on that in a way. But these are the interactions that are characterized by offering clients choice. You want to sit here, or would you rather sit there? Is this a good time for me to come in? Should I come back in 10 minutes? The things that you do to promote trauma-informed care are things that help you promote your safety, because it's very much less likely that somebody will escalate if you are making it clear by virtue of your body language when you knock on their door that you are not there to harm them. That you make it clear when you open the refrigerator and there's a stink of rotten eggs, that you know, they go, oh God, that's so, you know, that which of course people will, they're not going to think, oh boy, Patti really hates the smell of rotten eggs. Well, next time I'll make sure there are no rotten eggs. You know, Patti thinks I'm disgusting, right? So, you know, understanding, you know, all of these things are so interrelated. Really, I mean, collaboration, right? Even with those rotten eggs, to be able to say, look, you know, I bet you don't like the smell either. You know, what's a plan? I can't imagine you like it. Do we all let things go right in our refrigerator? You bet, right? Can I help you get rid of them now? So that the experience that person has is you're not othering them. You're not, declaring them less than. We're all in the same boat here somehow or other. And you hate the smell of those rotten eggs, and it does make you feel a little queasy. But it's the eggs that make you feel queasy, not that person. And that's a huge, huge difference. And you have to go out of your way to make sure that you're getting across to that human being that the eggs are the source of your problem, not the person. Because they're going to assume she thinks I'm disgusting. And you have to work your way backwards from that. And when you do that, when you're true to the principles of trauma-informed care, you are also staying within the bounds of your purpose, no matter what job you have.
And we're also in the unusual work setting of the fact that we work where someone lives. We come in and we plop in and we're like, oh, this is our job. We, traipse up and down the building because that's where we work. And sometimes you forget that people live here. This is their home. When we come in and let's say the rotten eggs, and we say, you got to get rid of this, we're coming into someone's home and telling them things they have to do, which I know I wouldn't be cool with. And then when you go in and you provide options, a lot of times we don't think we can provide choices to our clients. And actually we can. Yes, the eggs have to get out of the fridge. Absolutely. But we can give our clients the choice of how that can be done. And that right there is respecting a boundary. This is the boundary of my home. This is my refrigerator. This is where I spend, this is where I come to rest. And I think sometimes what we think our job tells us very goal-directed things to do. How many times have we done home inspections? Oh man, this stove is gross, this fridge, you gotta do. And that's pretty demeaning. I know sometimes when the super has to come to my apartment, and it's sort of the same situation. That's a super's workplace. And the super comes in, plops with his boots all over my house, fixes something, there's dust everywhere, and then he leaves. I'm kind of annoyed. I'm like, God, can he put something down, anything like that? So sometimes it helps to think of the place where we work as someone else's sanctuary, as their home. There's obviously there's things you have to do. There are regulations, but within those bounds, we can offer people choice. It's an opportunity to allow collaboration. It's like, what can we do to fix this? Sometimes it just takes a minute, a second to step back and be like, all right, how can we do this? How would I feel better about doing this? And, just sort of the basic things we do to connect with other human beings. Because we can have all the knowledge in the world, we can have all the answers, but if we don't connect with people on a human level, they're not going to hear any of it, and it's not going to be helpful. So how do we connect in a way that respects boundaries? How do we connect in a way that the person is able to hear us, and we can take care of the task that needs to be done? And it's not easy. It is not easy. So, it's ongoing work. I've been doing this for 20-something years, and I still get stuff wrong on a regular basis, more than I like to admit. Because it's an ongoing process. Every person is different, and there's no shame in making a mistake. Now, if we don't learn from it, that's where it becomes an issue.
The reason that we are spending time here with these issues is it because we want to get to this notion of it's not just about what you don't do. It's also very much about what is it you do when you are within the bounds of your job. That's the harder question to answer. And that's a little bit of what we're trying to do this afternoon together. Anybody want to say something about this photo, what you think, and what does it say about boundaries that are being established? Very off-putting. Boundaries, yeah.
I'm thinking of perspective on what the boundary looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Just looking at people, only because like sometimes people may interpret certain body languages as, oh, this person's being defensive, or that person is really just being protective of themselves or self-soothing. Can you repeat the?
Sorry. So basically, correct me if I'm wrong, she was talking about what some people see as defensive or aggressive is actually for some people self-soothing. So that's where misinterpretation can occur. All right.
The reason we like to share these images, is because they give perspective, I think, to the way some of our clients view the world, the way clients have experienced the world, and very importantly, how they may see you, how they may experience you. When I talk to you about joy in work, I'm not ignoring what it means to spend an hour and a half on the subway in 92-degree weather and then getting late for your job despite the fact that you left early. And then you race up to keep an appointment with a tenant. You knock on their door and they slam the door in your face. Every single one of us have had that experience. I'm going to guess from this response, right? So understanding that door slamming in your face is a communication of that client, to here's what I think about you, world, because that's how you've treated me, is at least a part of it. And the point you made in the front row, that beautiful point you made about what's, aggressive to some is defensive to the other, you don't know, what is going on behind that door they don't want you to see because they'll feel ashamed or they think you'll call the cops, for whatever else might be behind the door. But the point really is that it feels so personal. It feels so personal somebody slams the door in your face. It's like, what the F, really? Right, really? You kidding around? It's awful. So the question is, at that moment, how do you stay within the bounds of your job? At that moment, how do you stay within the bounds of your job? How do you not want to fight back? Take a breath. It's amazing how those breaths work, right?
Yeah. And along those lines, knowing the boundary of your job, You did not get the door slammed in your face by your friend. You did not get the door slammed in your face by a loved one. You got the door slammed in your face by a client who, yes, you are here to help and serve, but, whatever they're going through, they are not ready at that moment. And being able to go back the next day or 5 hours later and not holding that inside where it's like, this guy just slammed the door in my face. Why am I going to do his HRA application or whatever? Or, which I unfortunately have seen, he slammed the door in my face. He's getting his check last today by making him wait. And you know what? That is what leads to things like burnout. That's what leads to things like you feeling at the end of the day, you're going home and you feel like, wow, why do I feel like I just gone through like 12 rounds with Mike Tyson? So this is where boundaries protect you as well as the client. Sorry.
Handling a moment like that well, without retaliating, without disrupting the possibility of a good experience with that client later in the day, ought to be a great source of pride. A lot of what we do at its best is counterintuitive. It takes, the idea of emotional labor, the idea that it is hard work to not do what comes naturally. And isn't it true that part of professionalism is not doing what comes naturally? That is the truth. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing because it's part of the experience of safety. To know you can slam the door in somebody's face and they're not going to come back with a gun, right? How gigantic is that? One of the things that matters here, that tiny little language where we talk about self-care, there's no such thing as self-care without self-compassion. So really everything we're talking about here this afternoon is about self-compassion also. Acknowledging how hard all of this is. Giving yourself a break and asking for help. Be proud of yourself when things go well. Don't be hard on yourself when they don't. How many times have people said, boy, am I glad nobody saw me do that, right? All the time. If that thought occurs to you, try to reframe it. Because the judgment you're afraid of is also a judgment you're rendering against yourselves. And those negative judgments that accumulate that you have in relation to your own work does become a source of a burnout. So pay attention to those negative thoughts about yourself.
And there's never, ever any shame in asking for help. All of us need it at some point, and it is not a reflection of any sort of weakness. It's actually showing how insightful you are and knowing that, hey, I've reached my limit. That's why we work with teams. I've worked on inpatient units where people have to, sometimes they do manual holds. When someone is getting tired, another person taps them out, comes in, and provides a fresh set of hands. Sometimes we need that mentally. And having that support on a team is very important. Maybe that guy that slammed the door in your face needs something, whatever it may be, needs to make a phone call, and it's only been an hour. And honestly, you're not really in the right headspace. you should be able to go to your colleague and be like, you know what, I don't think I can look at Steve right now. Do you mind taking this one, and I'll take something for you? There's no shame in that. We're all human beings, and I think I speak from personal experience, but also just in working in this field, our intention is to do everything possible for our clients at the drop of a hat. I would walk in sometimes and I'm like, what are you doing? One person is trying to do 5 things for 5 clients at the same time with the best of intentions, but it's not realistic. And that is important to be able to sort of rein yourself in and sort of embrace the limits and responsibilities of your role. There's nothing wrong with being like, hey, on our ACT team, we have specific roles for people. Housing specialists, substance use specialists, whatever it may be. Because we know it's too much for one person to do. There's no issue, there's nothing wrong with a client coming to you and say, hey, I need an HRA 2010E done. And you're the substance use specialist. And being like, I understand, I'm going to let the housing specialist know, and they're going to come see you as soon as possible. Know the limit of your role, because that's what it's there for. It's there to protect you and to ensure that the person that's getting the service is getting quality care. Because if you're doing 5 things for 5 people, chances are the quality of that work is not going to be great. I know we are all top-notch social workers and case managers here, and I know the work we do, but it's impossible. By the time you get to the end of that 2010E and you're like, oh my God, I just want to, you know, this is meant to protect us and to ensure the quality of the services we get. So there's never any shame, there's never any guilt in being like, hey, I either need to pass this on or maybe we can do this a little later.
Lack of randomness is so important for the individuals we serve. Routines in the building really matter. We have a colleague sitting in the front row here, like probably others of you in property management. You know, right? I'm glad I know that. I'm glad we had the chance to chat before. That's a great example of different people having different roles. And yet I know that clients speak to you about lots of things that have nothing to do with property management, who ask you for all kinds of help, and that's challenging. It's hard, it's really hard. And I hope you have some place to go to talk about that. And you know, what do I do when they tell me about thus and so? When really what I want to know is, when is he going to pay his rent? Right? It's complicated. There are all kinds of different boundaries. There are physical boundaries. There are emotional, interpersonal boundaries. One of the things that it really is critical is the boundary that separates our power from a client's vulnerability. We don't want to cross that line. And if we don't recognize, as Louis was saying before, the fact that we do have power, we don't recognize it when we go, ugh, because of the bananas, or the eggs that smell terrible. We're not aware of our power. The power as the almighty judge, as the person who, in the minds of the tenants, could cause them to be evicted, who, you know, knows everything. We know people's histories because it's in their chart. Remember on the playground when somebody knew your parents weren't getting along? I mean, it's power they have. And we have that power, and clients know it. And yet they ask us a question about, do we have children, and we're going to change the subject. So being aware of that power differential makes it much less likely that you will abuse the power, that you will remind people of their status. You know, our goal here, even though we're talking at you, which is less than ideal, you know, is to make sure that you feel, and if you don't, something's wrong with what we're doing, that you feel the deep respect we have for you and all the work that you do. How deeply we feel honored to have you here, honestly. And that is true even though we're the ones standing in front of the room. So the question is, how do you convey that same sort of idea to clients? That you have this power and that you see them and you celebrate them as they are. It's very tricky, but it's a great thing to do when you can manage it. It's really, it's incredible. And remember that, you know, everybody in housing knows they walk through the room and nobody is looking at anybody else or anything else. Somebody's watching the TV, they're looking at you, right? You feel people's eyes on you, right? It is, somebody once said to us, you know, if there was like an Us magazine at the bridge, that it would sell out all the time. People are so curious to know about our lives. And that's one of the reasons why they're going to stare at you. They're going to say, how does she put herself together and look so great, you know? Because remember, they want to be you. And this is also an incredible opportunity for role modeling. An example from just a couple of weeks ago that somebody offered is that they were in a session with a client. It was scheduled to be half an hour, the half an hour was up. And the case manager said, you know what, Patti, we're going to end now. And Patti got very upset. You don't care about me, this is just a job to you. I'm nothing more than a paycheck. The answer that case manager gave was so inspired, really. What she told us she did was she used it as a teachable moment. That it's hard to ask somebody to leave. It's hard, even though you knew this was going to end in 30 minutes. It's hard. It's hard even for me to say, and I know it's hard for you to hear. I know that every time there are people in your apartment using drugs, and you don't want them there, that you have no idea. You know, we come and we help you because you call and you ask us to help. What I'm doing here is very similar to what you could do in that room when it's time for them to go. It's time for you to go now. We're going to be together again tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Can you imagine telling people in your apartment it's time for them to go? That is an example of role modeling, of taking what you're doing and generalizing it to real life and things that they can do too. And it also minimizes the sense of you're doing this to harm me, which is how something like that often lands. We know that, right? It hurts people. So think of yourself as a role model and extract the lesson and name it, share it, teach it. People love to learn when you take the time to teach like that. physical boundaries, you know, people get very upset when you get too close to them if you violated a physical boundary. You have to know the comfort zone. Fine, sometimes it's cultural. Physical boundaries also has to do with, like, you're in somebody's apartment, you don't pick up their telephone. Even when you go to open the refrigerator, is it okay if I open your fridge now? If you do that without asking, it's a violation of a boundary. Even though you're doing your job when you open the refrigerator. So that is an example of doing what you have to do, but doing it in a way that also maintains a therapeutic communication that you matter. Oh God, I did the wrong thing again. To the rescue, thank you. Right, I think you had it. Thank you. Interpersonal boundaries, what you choose to talk about defines the nature of the relationship. If I say, oh God, you know, I'm so sorry, I'm so tired, you have no idea what happened last night, we would be redefining the relationship, right? And it's the same with clients. Staying within the bounds means understanding that there are some things you will talk about and there are some things you will not talk about. The skill, the art of maintaining boundaries when you care about that individual is how you guide the conversation back to what is in bounds. When somebody wants to know all about you, your mom is looking at it, it's none of your business. But that's not the answer, right? The answer is, you tell me what you want for yourself, and we're going to help you get it. Are you curious about how I got this job? Are you curious about what it's like to get a high school diploma? The impulse to ask is not an invasion of privacy. It's an impulse to find out how to live, how to be who they want to be. You know, peers have a different role in terms of what they share. But even for peers who may share experience and do it brilliantly, it's always to the benefit of the individual. You know why you are sharing. And it has to be clear what the client-centered purpose is of that sharing. It's not always simple, but it goes back to what we started with, that does have to do with joy in work, which is knowing your purpose.
Along the lines of sharing too, sometimes sharing, oversharing information, things like giving a cigarette, giving $1, things like that, seem to be ways that we're trying to connect with our clients, but they are empty at best. It seems like sometimes, hey, this is an easy way in to get someone to talk. This is an easy way in to get someone to do something I want. Hey, if you go to this appointment, I'm gonna get you whatever. And it's, in the short term, it might be a way to connect. But in the long term, what it leads to is a boundary crossing. You know, one of the things we want to do is, you know, where it comes to limiting your role, is also being the consistent person in their life. You know, when that's another thing that when people who've experienced trauma, there is that inconsistency. Is this person, am I waking up this morning, is mom going to be okay, or is mom going to be on a rampage? Am I going to go to my family's house? Is my uncle going to be there or not? So there's that inconsistency that causes anxiety and stress. Once we can establish that, hey, this is Louis. Louis is like this every day. This is Patti. Patti is like this every day, no matter what. If I'm happy, sad, angry, those consistencies in their lives lead to developing better relationships, not only with staff, but with other people as well. Because they know, which goes back to the role modeling. It's like, hey, this is how someone treats me with respect. This is how I treat others with respect. And, it's very important to, be that person in their life that is going to show them how things can be instead of how things have always been up to that point.
Louis, if it's okay with you, I'm going to skip ahead to slide 15 because, believe it or not, it's almost a quarter of and we end at 3.
We do.
Don't we?
We do.
We do. Oh, I thought you were asking me a question. I thought, you're the expert here,
Yeah,
right?
I am.
Yeah, okay. So,
Plus I have a program that says so.
right. So here's something we cannot end without your knowing. And there are other things that will follow that we have time to talk about. When you think about boundaries, think about the continuum of behavior. In terms of human relationships, and that continuum has to do with under-involvement and over-involvement. We know what it's like in the zone of helpfulness. You barely have to think about what you're doing. It's amazing, right? It's like a pitcher can't exactly tell you what just happened, but they knew it was a great pitch. It happens to us too. Really what matters to keep you in that zone of helpfulness is noticing as you begin a slippery slide away from that gorgeous space to be in. So think about under-involvement. Think about indicators. And when I said something before about self-compassion, I am bound to repeat it here because you must understand that each and every one of you are going to look at this and find at least 2 things in under-involvement and over-involvement. Depending on your personality, maybe more in one side than the other, right? And it's not to beat yourself up. It's not to beat yourself up if you're glad when a client doesn't show. I mean it. I mean it. You don't beat yourself up when you're glad a client doesn't show. It's as human as can be. But if you keep it to yourself and you're not curious about why it happened, that is a feature of our experience that if you don't question it can lead to neglect, really. You don't give that person an equal portion of care. And by the way, to the extent we're talking about social justice, we're talking about giving people an equal portion of care who have not experienced that from the healthcare system. Have not. So we want to notice when this stuff is happening because it's much easier to pull yourself back when you first think, I'm glad he's not here. I got to go talk to Louis and find out what it is I don't like about, whatever you need to do, you do. And it's also okay to tell your supervisor. To tell your supervisor. If, you say, listen, I'm coming in on Saturday. It's Catherine's birthday, and I promised her I would show up for her birthday. I'm sure people here have done that. It's probably not a great idea. It's an indication of over-involvement with a particular client.
And the idea of the continuum is that these aren't hard lines, right? So if you do one of these things once, maybe it's not a huge issue, and you notice it and you pull yourself back. These are guidelines for you to see, sort of like, when you go bowling and you put the little bumpers up so you don't go in the gutter. Think of those as this. It's not like 1, 2, 3, I'm doing things wrong. But hey, I'm recognizing that maybe I'm doing a little bit of this, let me pull back. Or maybe I'm doing a little bit of that, I need to get more involved. So, looking down the list and then being like, I did this, and I messed up, is not the point of this. These are just guidelines, things for you to just keep in mind, because we all do these things at different points in the day, in our lives, with different clients, depending on who it is, and it's just important to know that these are indicating that maybe something is going a little bit astray. I know the minute we put things up like this, people are like going down the list and beating themselves up and are like, oh my God, I did this. That's not the purpose of it.
We said before, it's hard to sort of deconstruct sort of what's going on in the zone of helpfulness, but this is kind of it. By the way, we will be sharing the slides.
Yes, we will be
Right.
sharing the slides, so don't make yourself crazy taking notes.
I take pictures of slides myself. You pay attention in a different way. Right.
That's true of all of the sessions. So, anyway, sorry.
What are the risks of not respecting professional boundaries? We talk, to Sharon's point earlier, we talk about joy and work, but let's be real.
I think boundaries go both ways too. Just like I would never give someone a cigarette. Nobody's ever asked me for
Yeah.
one, thankfully. Just like I would never do that. I also would never go into a client's apartment and I've had clients offer me a cup of coffee or a bottle of water. I don't do that. I don't use their bathroom because that's not my place. It's their home. So I think it's remembering that the boundaries go both ways.
Yeah.
And you have to respect that.
Absolutely.
It's you have boundaries and the clients have boundaries, and that's part of role modeling also. Thank you so much for that. The damage to the therapeutic response relationship, and remember, this is very different, as Lewis was saying, than being a therapist. But the idea of maintaining the communication that is trauma-informed, that dignifies the individual, every interaction conveys what you believe about that person's dignity, that when you cross that bound, it's you can do things right for 3 years and then make a mistake. And it's very hard to roll that back. When you lose trust of somebody who has never had trust, you lose it, and that is very tough. And a very great skill is to be able to recognize when that's happened, when you made a mistake, and speak to the client about it, right? You can do that. Listen, I opened the door to your bathroom, and I just did that. I just did it. I don't know what got into me, and I'm sorry. And there are legal consequences for our staff, too. At the bridge, there are allegations against staff. Thankfully, almost not. I've been there for 8 years. I can think of one that's been founded. But clients have the right to complain. And there's somebody in your agency that will investigate. And it's another reason why I urge you to pay attention when you make mistakes and speak up. There is never a time when a staff person gets into trouble when they had the awareness that something went wrong and they spoke about it with their supervisor, and they may have even documented it in the notes. I gave him money. I was leaving, it was the end of the day. He was really hungry. I had no idea how to get him food. I gave him $5. It's very important that your colleagues know that. Because one day, somebody's going to say, Patti, you gave Louis $5 and now you're not giving it to me?
Everybody hears everything.
And everybody, right? So when you make a mistake, share it and own it. And let your colleagues know. Because you can then tell them, you're going to be hearing. And I'm sorry because I know I've made your life a little harder. So these mistakes are fine to make, but they're very troubling when you pretend like they didn't happen. Here again, these are just meant, as you'll see when you get the slides and you can reflect on them more deeply, these are really just meant, again, as warning signs, as flashing yellow lights. You know, if you find yourself repeatedly thinking about a client at home and you can't get to sleep, pay attention. What the heck does that mean? Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's helplessness. Sometimes it's a feeling of incompetence. But it's a warning sign. Pay attention to it and figure out what it means and address it if you can. We told you before that we were going to give you tips for maintaining boundaries, yeses and nos, do's and don'ts. That's what these are, really. It's easy to say, don't socialize with clients. You know what one of the number one questions we get at the bridge? What do I do if a client is at the same club I'm at? And I've already paid a lot of money for the drinks on my table, and honestly, I don't want to leave. What am I supposed to do? And there is no answer we give right or wrong, but we are very clear that if you stay, whatever you do is going to be public knowledge, the whole world will know. Right. So just be aware of that. Just be aware of that, that's all. You can't ask the client to leave. You can't say, don't take pictures of me, I want that video.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, same goes for places like church. You know, if you are going to be anywhere where your personal information or your personal life is going to be exposed, then it's up to you to weigh that option. You know, maybe I have to find another place to go for now, or maybe I leave today, come back another day. But like I said, there's no hard and fast rule, but you have to weigh what will be known.
In a small town, it's harder. Although New York sometimes feels an awful lot like a small town, right? I mean, look, I was walking around the room before, and it was like 3 degrees of separation in speaking with so many people, and it's like that with our clients too. You know, you go to the grocery, and somebody you know who's a tenant in the building is bagging because that's a fantastic job they just got. You know, it's called dual roles. It's a different way of relating to the person. And context matters. But it's not true that the kinds of things you may chit-chat with another bagger are the things you'll chit-chat with this person about. Even though it's a separate, it's altogether separate. It's very hard. We had somebody ask that a sister of this individual that was a tenant is a yoga teacher, and she knows she's a great yoga, she'd like to go take yoga lessons with her sister. And after our conversation, she decided not to. But that would have been an example of a dual relationship. That gets complicated. You know, I love paying attention to your sad, bad, anxious moods, because that's when we make mistakes. Showing up. We all have losses. Showing up after the loss of a loved one at work, which we will all do, because we don't disappear after that, hopefully. And hopefully work is a place where if you are in mourning, your grief stays with you for not just the 3 days you may have off, but the first week, the second week, the third week, even the fourth, is a place where there is space for those emotions. But you're also going to be more vulnerable, and it's when you make mistakes. So pay attention to that. Understand you are not the same. You're more vulnerable.
And our instinct is to ignore that stuff. It's like, oh, I'll get over it, I'm fine, whatever. It's like, no. It's important to acknowledge it and know.
I did not just do this. I have no idea what I'm doing wrong when it happens. You earned your, not pay because you're volunteering, but not. I give up. Do not borrow or lend money to clients, right? This is key. We needed to get here. Setting boundaries is so much for you guys. It's so much about your well-being. Anytime people talk to you about boundaries, they're going to talk about self-care as the boundary between work and not work, and making sure that you maintain that. That's very important. The words we want to leave you with, though, is that very often you'll hear people talk about self-care, meaning go get that massage, go for a run. Good luck to most of us going to get that massage after work, right?
Yeah.
Or being able to go for a run when, you know, the babysitter is just leaving or your kid just picking up your kids from daycare. Good luck. So the very important guidance that we have about that boundary, the easiest way to let work go and be present whatever the situation is at home, is to be proud of what you did during the day. Don't leave your office without reflecting on what happened during the day. And every person here can find 3 minutes where they felt that was good. And the best way to promote your self-care is to find those 3 minutes every day and give yourself credit. And if you want to talk about your day, maybe even tell somebody, you know what I did that went great? There is nothing in the world like that. So thank you all for what you do. Really, thank you, guys.